You have called for a move towards social physics. Can you describe what your vision of social physics is and how it differs from modern sociology?
About as much as anything possibly could. Basically, I will have a physics model of explanation. Even though I do a lot of biological stuff, my model, just like Comp was in many ways, is physics. You assume that the social universe, like the biological universe or the physical universe, has certain properties that are invariant, and certain processes that drive those properties and the relationships among them. And those are probably invariant. They vary, but they're invariant. The processes don't come and go. They're there, they're always there. And so my goal as a social physicist is to develop laws about those things to explain their operation. And then if you have those laws can be used to change the world if you can. Those laws can also tell you what you can't change. Mm-hmm. And that's important as much as what you can change. Right now, most sociologists walk around thinking they can change everything just the way they want it. That's not possible. Gratification is not going away. Racism is not going away. Discrimination is not going away. The issue is, how do you mitigate it in a big, complex, differentiated, stratified society? If you think they're going to go away, that's very naive. We can mitigate them. And so that's where a sociology can be useful. But it's being stormtroopers for social movement organizations. They don't need sociologists. We're just so silly, quite frankly. We got to get in the way. People who are organizing social movements, like Black Lives Matter, they don't need a sociologist. They're doing just fine. They understand what's necessary to do a movement and what can get people's passions up to make a movement. And they've been very successful. And I'm very proud of that. But I don't think sociologists have anything to do with it.
Yeah, I agree. It's like they want to be the new vanguard or something like that.
We're the rear guard of that action.
So you have described yourself as a positivist, while at the same time distancing yourself from logical positivism. So you're kind of going back to Comte in your positivism. Can you elaborate on the difference between the positivism that you're talking about and the logical positivism that became very popular in the mid 20th century?
Yeah, that's one of the things that occurred when I was in graduate school. One of the sort of general topics of discussion at the sociology table at the student union. Had a great student union at Cornell, and we had our own basically de facto table. So there was always a sociologist to go talk to. And one of the discussions that was always occurring was about theory construction. That was a big deal back in the 50s and 60s and up into the middle 70s. And so they were constantly talking about it. And I was, to my surprise, when I think back on it, not very interested in that conversation at all. I sort of listened to it. I didn't feel like reading those philosophers. I read Hempel and Brewerth and the other ones who were all big shots at that time, talking about theory construction, how it's done. But it struck me, the thing that struck me most about those readings was these are philosophers telling scientists how to theorize. And these philosophers have never done any scientific theorizing. So I felt I'd rather look at what real scientists do when they theorize, not what positivists say they do. And they're two different things. So I deliberately went to labs and talks in physics and biology where they looked theoretical. They were supposed to be very descriptive. And this wasn't anything that the philosophers were saying. I could see that. And so it didn't interest me. When I finally decided to label what I did, I went back to Comte, because Comte is kind of a crazy guy. But the first 100 pages of positive philosophy, everyone should read. They're really good. And he's essentially laying out what the discipline should be. It should be a discipline that seeks laws about human organization. And his model was Newton's laws of physics. And that always struck me as the way it should be. And so that's why I started using the name positivism to describe what I do. I did it also because it irritated people. It got their attention. It was not a bad was a good and bad strategy. But the logical part was all this stuff of the philosophers about theory construction. And what I had seen when people tried to follow the instructions of theory construction, they were, maybe 20 books on theory construction written by social scientists during that period of time. And they were acting like it's theory is built like a house, that there are these rules you follow, and then that'll make you create a theory. And they've got it all wrong. You create a theory by having an insight, whatever it is. It's an insight about how the world works, and the actual writing up of the theory part is mop-up work. And you wouldn't want to turn to a philosopher and say, oh, no, an axiomatic theory would do this and that, and you have these deductions for this and that. And that's just struck me as ridiculous for sociologists to think that way. And that was not an applicable paradigm. And so my thought was, you do what Comte said, just state the basic relationships among fundamental properties of the social universe. State them in the most parsimonious and succinct way you can. Now, it would be, of course, preferable that it's all mathematics, but that sometimes is not the best way to state it. And so that's what I began to do. And probably the first part of my career as doing theory was essentially translating all the theories that I was interested in into propositions and models. And then eventually, when I started doing my own theory in the 80s, when I started trying to do something that was original, as opposed to being just a commentary or a formalization of existing theory and theorists, I knew what I was doing, and I wasn't tied down with what the philosophers said about theory. That was irrelevant. But what I was trying to do is find the simplest, most parsimonious way to state a relationship among the fundamental properties of the social universe that are driving the social universe. And if you know those properties, you know their dynamics, now you can be useful to society in giving knowledge that can maybe mitigate some of the problematic conditions. You can't eliminate a lot of them, because big, complex, differentiated societies are always going to have a lot of problems of integration. That's just the facts of life. And so that's what I've tried to do, and I continue to try to do it. People don't pay much attention to that part of what I do.
Do you have many fellow travelers in the positivism framework, or are you?
I have a lot of them, but won't call themselves positivists. Randy Collins, for example, and I will basically think the same about what theory should be doing, but he didn't want to get that label on himself. He's much more politically astute than I am. But I just thought I'd poke people in the eye with the idea, and maybe they'd pay attention. And they sort of did.
Yeah.
They were kind of pissed off when they were reading it, but it seemed to have worked. It's just people just read the stuff. They didn't like it, but they read it. But I never was interested in the logical part. That struck me as a bore when I was sitting around the tables at Cornell. And I read a lot of it eventually just to make sure that I was right. And the more I read, the more I realized what I was right. And the more I read sociologists talking about theory construction, the more I realized they had no idea how to do this, because they themselves didn't do it. They talked about what you should do, but they weren't out there actually trying to translate theories into abstract models and to simple, formal statements about the relationship among the properties of the universe that you're theorizing about. And so I was never intrigued by that, and I was right. I think I was right. No one's intrigued by it anymore. But